Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that gets into the heart of complex ideas, cuts through the noise, and pulls out those clear insights you need. Today, we're tackling something, well, fascinatingly difficult. How do you actually measure spiritual well-being? I mean, it feels so personal, so intangible, almost like trying to grab smoke. Our mission here is to unpack how one research team tried to do just that. We're diving into a new 2025 paper, Measuring Spiritual Well-Being, Seeking a Valid, Reliable, and Usable Measure by Nigel Pegram and Rebecca Launder. We'll follow their whole process, the challenge, the clever solution they came up with, and what it all means for understanding ourselves.
Yeah, and this whole thing kicked off because of a really practical need. There's an Australian charity, Mission Australia, they have a Christian background, and they were setting up chaplaincy programs, specifically in communities facing, serious social disadvantage. They really needed a solid way to see if their chaplains' work was making a difference.
Not just materially, but spiritually.
Exactly, on people's spiritual health. But the big challenge was finding a measure that worked in Australia's incredibly diverse, multi-faith society. That was the sticking point.
Okay, that sounds like a huge hurdle right from the start. So I guess they first looked at what measures already existed?
He did, yeah. They surveyed the field. But most existing tools just didn't fit what Mission Australia needed.
Why not? What were the criteria?
Well, several things. First, brevity. Had to be short enough for, busy chaplains to actually use. Second, accessibility. Easy to understand, even for people with lower literacy, which is common in the communities they serve.
Right.
And the absolute crucial one, it had to work in a multi-faith context. That ruled out quite a few.
How so? What kind of tools did they look at?
Well, some were just way too long, like the Spiritual Wellbeing Scale, 20 items.
Wow.
The Spiritual Assessment Inventory, 49 items.
Wow, yeah. Not practical.
Not at all. Or the Spiritual Involvement and Belief Scale, 26 items. Others were too specific, like the Spirituality Index of Wellbeing, mainly designed for health settings, didn't quite capture the broader idea they needed. And then there was this other issue. Quite a few had what the paper calls a heavily theocentric view.
Meaning very God-focused.
Exactly. Centered on a relationship with God. Think tools like InSpirit, RCSS, STI, just not suitable for everyone, especially people with no faith or maybe non-theistic spiritual paths.
Okay. What about the Personal Well-Being Index, the PWI? You mentioned Mission Australia was already using that one. Did it have a spirituality component?
It did, but it turned out to be problematic too. It just had this one question. Satisfaction with spiritual or religious beliefs.
Ah, the double question issue.
Right. It kind of lumps spiritual and religious together, and they aren't always the same thing, are they? You can be deeply spiritual without being religious. The researchers felt it lacked nuance. Plus, there was a concern it leaned towards a sort of Western individualistic view of spirituality. And actually, Mission Australia leadership later confirmed this. They felt questions like that could be culturally insensitive, especially for Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples, where culture and spirituality are just completely intertwined.
That's a really important point. It suggests maybe traditional research tools haven't always grasped that cultural depth. Okay, so let's unpack this. If existing tools weren't cutting it, what did the researchers do instead? Did they start from scratch?
Not entirely from scratch. They found a good starting point. Fisher's model of spiritual well-being.
Fisher's model? What's that?
It breaks spiritual well-being down into 4 core relationships or domains. Your relationship with the divine, with others, with the environment, and with yourself. It had already been turned into measurable questions in another tool, the Spiritual Wellbeing Index. So it offered, brevity and a solid theoretical base to build on.
Okay, so they had these 4 domains, but you said they innovated.
They did. This work is really interesting. They brought in experts from humanities, social science, ministry, theology to really scrutinize those 4 domains. And based on that expert feedback, they added 2 new domains they felt were missing but crucial.
Which were?
First, meaning or purpose in life. Pretty fundamental well-being, right?
Absolutely.
And second, relationship with the wider community. They made a distinction between just other people and your connection to the broader community. That was seen as vital, especially for certain cultures.
So that gives us 6 domains in their new scale, the SWS.
That's right. The Spiritual Wellbeing Scale, or SWS, covers these 6. 1, meaning or purpose. 2, relationship with God or the divine. 3, relationships with other people. 4, relationship with the wider community. 5, relationship with the environment. And 6, relationship with yourself.
Okay, 6 domains. But what's the really new part about how the SWS measures these?
The key innovation is this. For each of those 6 domains, it measures 2 things. First, how important that domain is to you personally. And second, what your current state or satisfaction level is in that domain.
Importance and skate. Why both?
Because spirituality is just so complex and diverse. Think about it. Someone from a monotheistic faith might say their relationship with God is incredibly important, maybe more so than the environment.
Okay.
But someone else, maybe from a pantheistic tradition, might see the divine in the environment. So that relationship becomes hugely important for their spiritual well-being. The paper uses the example of Indigenous Australians. Their spirituality is profoundly tied to the land. So the environment domain's importance is likely much higher for them than for, say, a non-Indigenous Australian, even if both happen to rate their satisfaction with the environment similarly.
Ah, I see. It's capturing that personal weighting. So what does this mean for you, the listener? It means this scale isn't imposing one single definition. It's trying to understand your unique spiritual priorities, what matters most to you.
Precisely. It respects that diversity. And this two-part structure also affects the scoring, because some domains might genuinely be unimportant to someone.
Like the God-divine one you mentioned earlier, some people rated it 0 importance.
Exactly. In the study, 17% rated relationship with God the divine as 0 importance. So you can't just multiply importance by state that would unfairly lower the overall score if a domain is unimportant, rather than just having low satisfaction.
So how does it work then?
It uses what they call proportional importance. Basically, it calculates a weighted score for each domain based on how important it is relative to the other domains for that person. This gives an overall SWS score as a percentage. Much clearer, much easier to interpret than some complex scoring systems.
Okay, that sounds quite elegant. So they developed this SWS. How did they test it out?
They ran an online survey, got 279 completed responses, mostly from Mission Australia staff and also staff and students at Alfred Cruces University College.
And the people who responded, what were the demographics like?
Pretty varied, which is good. Ages ranged from 20s up to 60 plus, mostly female, 71% versus 29% male. Ethnicity was also quite diverse. Oceanians, mostly Australians, Northwest Europeans, and then another category that groups smaller representations together.
And did they just use the SWS in the survey? Or compare it to other things?
No, they included other established measures alongside it for validation. They used the Personal Wellbeing Index, the PWI we talked about, and also PANAS, the Positive and Negative Effects Schedule.
PANAS measures mood, right? Positive and negative feelings.
That's the one. Standard tool for checking emotional state, helps see if the SWS correlates with general feelings of well-being as you'd expect.
Got it. So what did the first look at the SWS results show? Any immediate takeaways or surprises in how people answered?
Yeah, a few interesting bits. Most questions got the full range of answers, 0 to 10, which is good, shows it captures variation. But interestingly, relationships with other people. Nobody rated its importance below 3, and just it's pretty universally important for spiritual health.
Makes sense.
And meaning or purpose in life, nobody rated its importance as 0. Everyone saw at least some importance there. Also, for satisfaction, nobody gave a 0 for relationship with the wider community or relationship with the environment. People found at least some level of satisfaction in those connections.
Okay, interesting initial findings. What about the more technical side? Did the scale prove reliable? Like, is it a consistent measure?
Very much so.
Yeah.
The psychometric properties were strong. Both the importance part and the state part of the SWS showed excellent internal reliability. The Cronbach's alpha, that's the statistical measure for reliability, was 0.81 for importance and 0.875 for state, which is really good, especially for short scales like this one.
Solid results.
And here's that nuance again about the God-divine question. Remember how some people rated it 0 importance?
Yeah.
Statistically, removing that specific question would have slightly bumped up the reliability score for the importance scale.
Oh, so why didn't
Because of their core principle. The researchers made a very deliberate choice to keep it. Their argument was, look, omitting it would mean ignoring vital data from a huge chunk of the population, anyone with a theistic spirituality, like Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Jews.
Oh, right. It would undermine the whole multi-faith goal.
Exactly. It shows they were committed to inclusivity over just tweaking for the highest possible statistic.
That's commendable. Okay, so the SWS is reliable on its own. How did it compare to those other measures they included, the PANAS mood scale and the PWI Wellbeing Index?
Good correlations there, mostly as you'd expect. With PANAS, the SWS scores correlated moderately with positive affect. Higher spiritual well-being went with more positive feelings.
And negatively with negative feelings.
Yeah. Higher SWS scores correlated with lower negative affect scores. That fits. Spiritual well-being is linked to emotional state.
Makes sense. And against the PWI. The general well-being measure.
Stronger connection there. The SWS showed a moderate to strong correlation with the overall PWI score, and also with the PWI's life as a whole question, which again makes conceptual sense. Your spiritual well-being, things like meaning, purpose, connection, is a big part of your overall evaluation of life.
And probably correlates well with relationships too.
Definitely. Strong correlation with the PWI's personal relationships item. They're closely related concepts.
Okay, but what about the specific spirituality questions on the PWI? How did the SWS line up against those? You said they expanded the original PWI question.
Right. For this study, they split the PWI single spirituality item into three: satisfaction with spiritual beliefs, and religious practices. And here's where it got really interesting. The correlations between the SWS overall score and these specific PWI items were, well, only moderate, lower than they expected if both were measuring the exact same thing.
Lower. So the SWS, this new scale, isn't measuring the same spirituality as the questions in the PWI.
That's exactly what the analysis suggested. They ran a factor analysis, a technique, to see which questions cluster together statistically.
What did it show?
It revealed two distinct factors, two underlying groupings. Factor 1 contained all the SWS questions. It seemed to represent a broader, maybe less formal, less theocentric kind of spirituality.
Okay. And factor 2?
Factor 2 grouped together those three PWI spirituality religion questions plus just one SWS item. Domain 2, the relationship with God the divine.
Ah. So that second factor looks more like formal religion or God-centered spirituality.
That's the interpretation. They suggest factor 2 represents formal, organized spirituality, perhaps a better termed religion, including theocentric types of spirituality.
Wow. So the big takeaway is?
The researchers contend that while both the SWS and the PWI tap into spirituality, they're likely measuring different constructs of it. The SWS is capturing something broader, more diverse.
And that links back to the feedback from Mission Australia about the PWI feeling culturally off.
Precisely. Remember the staff feedback about PWI being potentially insensitive for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, where spirituality and culture are inseparable? The SWS was deliberately designed to embrace those diverse forms, the non-Western, non-theocentric views. Plus, it's shorter and more practical. So it seemed like the better fit.
This is fascinating. It really reframes how we might think about spirituality itself. So does this broader spiritual well-being captured by the SWS vary depending on who you are? Did they find demographic differences, age, gender, ethnicity?
They did look at that. For age, yes, there seems to be a trend. Spiritual well-being generally increased with age in their sample.
Any specific examples?
Yeah, younger folks, those in their 20s, tended to rate the importance of the environment relationship lower than older groups did. And for the state of relationship with yourself, people in their 30s scored significantly lower than those in their 60s.
Yeah.
Maybe suggesting growing self-acceptance over time.
Interesting. What about gender?
No significant differences popped out between men and women in this particular study. Some items were close. They said it approached significance, but nothing conclusive yet. Needs a bigger sample, probably.
Okay. And ethnicity. You mentioned that was complex.
It was. They did find some significant differences. The group categorized as other, which was a mix of backgrounds, actually showed higher overall SWS scores and higher scores on the state of meaning or purpose compared to the Northwest European and Oceanian groups.
But they had caveats there.
Big caveats.
Yeah.
The sample sizes for some ethnic groups were small, which really limits how much weight you can put on those findings. They stress that more research with larger, more representative ethnic groups is definitely needed.
Understood. Now, thinking about actually using the SWS, you mentioned chaplains gave feedback from using it in the field.
Yes, really valuable practical feedback. They noticed that when they asked all the importance questions first, then all the skate questions, people sometimes just repeated their importance score for the state score.
Ah, like they got into a pattern.
Kind of, yeah. Maybe just answering quickly or not shifting mindset between how important is this and how satisfied am I?
So what's the proposed fix?
Simple, really. Ask importance, then state for each domain before moving to the next one. So importance domain 1, state domain 1, then importance domain 2, state domain 2, and so on.
Keep switching the focus for each domain.
Exactly. They haven't tested this change statistically yet, but it's the recommendation for future use based on that real-world observation.
Makes practical sense. So looking ahead, what are the next steps for this research? Where does the SWS go from here?
They laid out a few key areas. First, more validation work, comparing the SWS with other spiritual well-being tools to really pinpoint how it relates and differs. Second, they absolutely need a larger sample size. more responses.
Why larger? What would that allow?
Several things. It would help clarify those tentative findings about ethnicity. It could allow them to create normalized data, basically, benchmarks for what typical scores look like, which could be useful diagnostically down the line, and just generally allow for more robust statistical testing.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, refining that ethnicity question itself. Given the unexpectedly high number identifying as Indigenous Australian, they think maybe adding a separate nationality question might clear up potential confusion between ethnicity and nationality for respondents.
Good point.
And finally, they need to actually test that paired question format importance, then state for each domain to see if the data backs up the chaplain's anecdotal feedback that it works better.
So quite a bit more work to do, but it sounds like the SWS is a really promising step forward.
I think so.
It really seems like a valuable new tool, validated, reliable, and crucially designed from the ground up to capture that complex, diverse, personal nature of spiritual well-being in a way older tools maybe didn't. It moves beyond some of those limitations.
It does. It tries to meet people where they are, spiritually speaking.
It respects that individual perspective, that unique spiritual landscape, rather than imposing a single mold.
Exactly. And it makes you think, doesn't it? If the way we measure something shapes how we understand it, what other complex, intangible parts of our lives, maybe things beyond spirituality, could benefit from this kind of nuanced, culturally aware, multidimensional measurement?
That is a provocative thought. What are we missing because our rulers are too simple? For you listening, maybe consider your own life domains. What hold proportional importance for you? Thinking about that balance might offer some real insights into your own well-being. Thanks for diving deck with us today.